As should be evident from a lot of my video content, as the fancy expression goes, I happen to like video games a lot. As games go though, I do have a lot of pet peeves with them, and some of those pet peeves have to do with how people talk about games. Essentially, there are certain well-established phrases and flat-out misconceptions that really just get under my skin about games. And that's what I want to talk to all of you about today. These are my 5 gaming misconceptions which I find annoying. Number 1. Any and all variants of the term Tetris Like. Now, this is something that used to be pretty prevalent in the 1990s. For the time, it was maybe even acceptable to compare every single puzzle game with Tetris. I mean, it was pretty much the gold standard for the genre in its heyday. And sadly, since there really hasn't been a hit puzzle game on the same level since, I mean, unless you really want to count Candy Crush, this game language faux pas has stuck around. This is a misconception that crosses gamer lines from filthy casuals to quote-unquote hardcore gamers and even professional journalists. It's the misconception that any game with a mechanic of falling blocks can be referred to as being Tetris-like, rather than just a puzzle game. It's really annoying because falling block, as it happens, is the actual subgenre of puzzle games which fall under this umbrella. But I find this comparison people make between Tetris and other falling block games even more annoying because falling blocks are not, in my view, what define Tetris as a game. What really defines Tetris, in my view, is the mechanic of clearing lines, whereas a vast majority of other falling block games are about matching certain types of blocks. This is not and has never been the defining characteristic of Tetris. To me, it's like calling Mega Man Mario-like just because both games happen to involve jumping on platforms. But we don't call those games Mario-like, do we? We use the actual name, which is platformer. But once we're through the other entries, you'll hopefully understand that getting people to use proper terminology is a lost cause. Number 2, the idea that first-person viewpoints help you immerse into the game world. Game immersion is one of those nebulous concepts which you either believe in or don't. It's basically the same as religion. And if you belong into the camp that believes game immersion to be just a big load, feel free to skip to the next entry. Now, I don't have a particular antipathy towards the FPS genre as a whole, but I can literally count with one hand the number of games where I felt that the first-person perspective made me feel I was the character in the game world. The choice of a first-person view in almost all cases, in my view, should be a strictly technical thing. You choose the perspective of a game based on how you optimally play it, which is why no one ever plays a game like Skyrim in third person. However, I feel the first-person view really doesn't make me feel that I'm actually in the game world, and most of the time I find games that are in first-person view to be, well, frankly, lifeless. Maybe this is just me, but I like watching my character do stuff in the game, and I don't really get much joy from being forced to look through their eyes. I find a first-person view extremely restrictive, if anything. Now, it's okay in a game like Half-Life or Metroid Prime where you're supposed to feel isolated and alone, but I just generally am not a fan of games that I have to play with the first-person view and always feel a slight disconnect because of it. So, this one's not so much a misconception, just my dissent from those who think this way. Number 3, people who think Mario Party is all about luck. There seems to be a very vocal minority online who absolutely despise Mario Party as a series, and the consistent complaint I hear from these people is that Mario Party is all down to luck. Now, to be perfectly fair, parts of Mario Party are definitely based on luck, and other aspects of the game are even intentionally rigged. But when you break it all down, Mario Party is actually a deviously easy game to manipulate. At least in the older games, it was much easier to get high numbers on the dice rolls if your timing was good. And of course, getting further meant you were likely to collect more stars than anyone. But in the same vein, you could opt out of actually trying to buy stars and instead trying to land consistently on similar spaces, buying as many candies, and winning as many minigames as possible so you could force the game to give you at least 2 of the 3 bonus stars at the end. Or you could screw the other players over with chance time. And this used to frustrate me too, because I'm the kind of guy who likes to play the minigames well. But I'm not that good about strategizing what part of the board to exploit in order to get the maximum number of stars. As a result, I did quite like the two newest iterations of Mario Party, since winning in them is based almost entirely on how well you play the minigames, although I'll admit that the games had some other problems. So basically I'm saying, if you think Mario Party is all about luck, then the ugly truth might be that maybe you're just really crap at Mario Party. Number 4. People who don't understand the real meaning of the term adventure game. Considering how adventure games have fallen into the abyss of downloadable titles from once being the AAA PC titles of the 90s, it's easy to see why people constantly misuse the term. I see it being used in reference to anything between RPGs to platformers without any remorse. So let's make this perfectly simple. Adventure games refers to a very specific subset of game genres, which are all narrative-based. These are interactive fiction or text adventures, graphic adventure games, point-and-click adventure games, and yes, those two are separate things, and 3D free roaming adventure games. Now, the word people are often looking for is actually the term action adventure, which can refer to pretty much anything from Assassin's Creed to Zelda, and from Uncharted to Batman Arkham Asylum. And it's easy to see why people make the mistake, since the term adventure game sounds pretty generic by itself. But just do old gaming farts like myself a favor in the future, and please add that word action to the start. It really does make all the difference in the world. And speaking of Zelda, number 5. People who think Zelda is an RPG. This has been a hot potato topic since the inception of the Zelda series, and something that I still run across from time to time. Now, this one is even more baffling because RPGs are so prevalent that you'd think any person who has actually played an RPG and then a Zelda game could easily spot the difference. And if people still can't grasp this, let's just spell it out for you. The defining characteristics of an RPG are stat systems, random chance deciding all your actions, hours of pointless grinding, terrible characters, and storylines made to cater for you running around the game world making an ass of yourself. The defining characteristics of a Zelda game are an open game world, action gameplay, progression through finding new items, learning new gameplay mechanics, while enjoying an excellent story with colorful and multifaceted characters. Now yes, Zelda has borrowed elements of the RPG genre, but once again, calling it that is just a plain old misnomer, because Zelda lacks the most important defining element of any RPG, which is a stat screen with its lines of arbitrary numbers which control your destiny. Now once again, to be fair, there is one Zelda game which actually is also an RPG. Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link. You know, the most maligned canonical entry of the whole series. So once again, the word you want is action-adventure, not RPG, not adventure, and certainly not Tetris-like. That's all from me for now. I'm Hanna the Honda Mäkinen. See you on the next one.